Hey everybody, welcome to more week 3 in our series Seasons of the Soul. If you were with us this past week, you know that we made it to fall, the season that we're actually currently calendar-wise in right now. And we even said, perhaps at your location, I know several of us talked about it during communicators meeting, that according to all the surveys and all those kind of things, fall seems to be kind of an overwhelming favorite for most people. There's something about it. Maybe it's the visible changes we see, the cooling down after a long summer, the changes in the colors around us, and then the promise of times of celebration and seasons of Thanksgiving that come during this season. But nevertheless, fall is special. And today I want us to spend a few minutes thinking about that one aspect of fall that we touched on Sunday, but just expand on a little bit. And that is that fall brings for us that time where we finally get to see a harvest. The harvest that God has promised, that we have worked for, toiled in throughout not just the spring, but especially during that summer season. And now we finally get to see the harvest. There's a great psalm that I'd like to share with you today. It's Psalm 85, and I'm going to read the entirety, but focus really towards the end of this psalm. It may be familiar to you, it may not. It's written by the sons of Korah, and this is what it is. It's really a prayer of restoration and a prayer for the favor of God. He says this: Lord, you showed favor to your land. You restored the fortunes of Jacob. You forgave your people's guilt. You covered all their sin. You withdrew all your fury. You turned from your burning anger. Return to us, God of our salvation, and abandon your displeasure with us. Will you be angry with us forever? Will you prolong your anger for all generations? Will you not revive us again so that your people may rejoice in you? Show us your faithful love, Lord, and give us your salvation. He goes on to say in verse 8, I will listen to what God will say. Surely the Lord will declare peace to his people, his faithful ones, and not let them go back to foolish ways. His salvation is very near those who fear him, so that glory may dwell in our land. Faithful love and truth will join together. Righteousness and peace will embrace. Truth will spring up from the earth, and righteousness will look down from heaven. And then listen to these last two verses, verses 12 and 13. Also, the Lord will provide what is good, and our land will yield its crops. Righteousness will go before him to prepare the way for his steps. Such a beautiful idea that he brings there in that verse 12 in particular, where he says, also the Lord will provide what is good, and our land will yield its crops. Our land will yield its harvest. What we planted, what we worked in, will finally yield its fruit. Can we just be honest? I think we know it. We kind of talked about it maybe even last week in our, or 2 weeks ago in our season of summer. The growing season can be tough and it can be long. You know, you plant the seed in the spring and you begin to celebrate what is to come, but months go by. And at times the growth of a crop, it almost seems like it's never going to happen. Maybe you've never planted seeds before, but you plant this little small seed and you water it and you fertilize it and you do all the things necessary to see it grow. And it can take weeks and weeks, maybe even months before you see it break through the soil. And then even after it breaks through, you'll see it begin to grow and strengthen. You'll see it develop leaves and its stems and its branches get stronger and stronger, but still yet, there is no perception so often that there's any fruit, that there's anything that will come from that. I love this statement. In midsummer, the calendar seems full of weeks when storms and disease threaten our crops, and harvest time seems far away. That's true, isn't it? And if you're not in a season of fall right now, it can feel that way. You can feel the weight of the labor and the toil that you're in these days. And to wonder, when will God bring that harvest forward? You know, I think that's true for us, especially in our spiritual lives as well. I think we have seasons where our faith seems to grow really quickly. It springs up. We gravitate towards new truth and principles, and we apply them, and we see God bring fruit out of that. We see our lives flourish in spiritual ways. And then at other times, I think we go through seasons where we're really working to stay faithful. It seems hard. The harvest seems far, far away. We've got all these obstacles and all these challenges that just seem to be coming up against us. There are those spiritual storms that just seem to just be pounding us one after another. And then we find ourselves sometimes frustrated, disillusioned, questioning, maybe even on the verge of saying, it's not worth it. The heat, the drought, the storms, the pressures, we're tempted at times to say, I'm not sure if I can hold out for the harvest, especially when the harvest seems so far away. That's when we need to hear God's promises again. The psalmist here, as he writes, he says, Lord, you showed favor to your land. You restored the fortunes of Jacob. He's reminding himself, he's remembering what God has done in these early verses. His prayer is for God to do it again. He asks, will you be angry with us forever in verse 5? And in verse 6, will you not revive us? Will you not bring back the harvest in our lives again? And then his resolve, I think, is our resolve when we're waiting for the harvest to come. I will listen to what God will say. I will listen to what God will say. And he's reminded of that truth, of the faithful love and truth that join together in verse 10. And then he concludes by saying, I know. The Lord will provide what is good, and our land will yield its crops. Our land will bring forth its harvest. I think the invitation to remember what God has done and then to trust his promises helps us toil through so that when we come to this time of harvest, we really can celebrate what God has done, how he's really, in more ways than we realize, made us more like him and helped develop our faith more. The Lord will indeed give us what is good. In due time, the harvest will come. Maybe your prayer today would be to this, that you would say something along the lines of, Lord, thank you for your word that sustains us. Thank you for the grace that we find in our faith in Christ. And thank you for the promise that when a seed is planted, a harvest will come. Hope you enjoy the rest of your week and will join us for week 4 next Sunday in our Seasons of the Soul as we wrap up the series, looking to last season, winter, and what that brings into our life and what we learned there as well. And we'll follow that up back here at More. Hope to see you then. God bless.